right. Hello, everyone. Welcome, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We're all very pleased today to have 30 minutes of your time in your busy schedules. And as a proud partner for the ACT for many years now, Cashforce is really excited to host this session about the game of cash flow forecasting, and certainly with our client Unilever today. And we have a very exciting guest from Unilever with us, which I'll introduce you in a second. Now, before we start, a couple of simple housekeeping items. I'm informed there's an audience Q&A, a toolbar on the right-hand side of your screen with an About button and Participate. And throughout the session, please feel free to submit any questions in the Q&A box. And what, of course, we'll try to do is, as part of the session, answer those questions as soon as we can. And of course, we'll get back to you if we can't. Now, the questions will be overlaid on the screen for the speakers to see. So that's just to keep us, let's say, informed on those. Now, we're really thrilled today to have with us Gerard Teunenberg from Unilever. So, Gerard, welcome. And maybe it would be great if you introduce us a little bit.
Yeah, no, thanks, Nicola. I'm very happy to be here and looking forward to the discussion and hopefully the interesting questions. Yeah, Gerard, almost or a bit over 30 years working for Unilever. All this time in corporate functions, started off in finance, but moved quite quickly to treasury. So was responsible for back and middle office for a long period of time. Moved to Schaffhausen, Switzerland, and joined the global treasury team here in 2017. Also involved in larger projects during those 30 years, TMS installation, Swift setup, etc. And as I said, looking forward to the discussion today.
Thank you, Gerard. And indeed, let's get going. And a quick introduction from my side. So I'm Nicola Christian. I'm one of the co-founders and the CEO of Cashforce. And Cashforce is a cash management, forecasting, and working capital solution in the treasury space. And as Cashforce, we focus very much on the automation of the cash flow forecasting process. Of course, connecting with different systems around and trying to build a cash flow forecast in a more automated and more accurate and a more effective way. And as Cashforce, with I think 7 years ago when we started with this, we really wanted to create a niche space, a new space in this market. And I think 7 years later, great to see that as Cashforce, we're present globally, having global clients, and as well large financial institutions like Citi, Bank of America, BNP, really supporting us, backing us from both financial and commercial perspectives. And really still, I think, with the necessity of cash flow forecasting and the need or the interest to expand on this topic, I think some great future to come. But I think to start with the topic of today, the game of cash flow forecasting, as you can see from the picture, maybe a lot of trials and not always, let's say, something that sticks in the middle. I think everyone can potentially recognize this. Cash flow forecasting can be quite complex, and as Cashforce, we here call it a variety of questions from each of the treasurers on a day-to-day basis. And just to set some context for the discussion, which Gerard will bring here, is the type of questions that we get can be classified as some of the very basic questions. How do I build a cash flow forecast? What are the benefits of it? How do I make a direct forecast, or maybe I should make an indirect forecast? How do I connect the different local entities to this system to make sure I get their input? But typically they'll get a little bit more advanced, and we call them tactical questions. And then, of course, these questions are like the following: how do I model a forecast? How do I integrate my ERP data, my TMS data? How do I get from a horizon of 2 to 4 weeks to 13 weeks, or even longer, to 12 months? And it can get even more operational when we talk about intercompany transactions, customer payment behavior. And if you get it even one step further, there are expert questions that Cashforce gets to see. For example, how can I build more scenarios? How can I incorporate AI, machine learning? And an even more tricky one, how can I connect the dots with the controlling team that is making an indirect cash flow forecast? So I think just to set the scene here today, the game of cash flow forecasting is one which holds still many secrets. But interestingly, all of those questions are really coming to the surface in the last 2 years. One last piece around this context: a lot of the corporates out there, they do see potentially the need for cash flow forecasting, but what is now the difference with Excel? And how do I pull off a project like that when I have limited capacity from ERP resources, from resources in the treasury team? And will IT accept finally a solution, a software that's not called Excel or not called the ERP system itself, or SAP? Will that be acceptable? And how do I build then a business case to talk to my manager about the cash flow forecasting system? So I guess these are more general questions, but they are important to understand in the broader context of cash flow forecasting. Now, I think, Gerard, I think a goal of today is to cover a little bit the case study, ongoing case study with Unilever. So I'll give the word back to you, and probably answering a couple of the questions that were already pointed out.
Thanks, Nicolas. Let me start with a short commercial break. Unilever is one of the world's largest consumer goods companies, driven by purpose to make sustainable living commonplace. At Unilever, we have a long held the belief that being a responsible, sustainable business makes us stronger and gives us a better business. And it's based on 3 beliefs: brands with purpose grow, companies with purpose last, and people with purpose thrive. If you look at our business, it's pretty global. It's 2.5 billion people that use our products on a day-to-day basis. It's across 190 countries. In many of those countries, we have been present for more than 100 years, like India, Indonesia, and also Argentina. More than half of our turnover comes from these emerging markets. And our turnover in 2020 was around 51 billion euros, of which 58% came from these emerging markets. 25 million retailers in our global network, and we estimate that our value chain, we reach about 3 billion people. We have over 400 brands, of which 13 have a turnover of more than 1 billion in 2020. Our brands are grouped under 3 divisions: beauty and personal care, BPC, foods and refreshments, and home care. Where beauty and personal care is our largest division, with a turnover in 2020 of 21 billion euros, which is 40% of our total. 6 categories, with some of our most iconic brands like Dove, Rexona, and Lifebuoy. Foods and refreshment is the 2nd largest division, a turnover of 19 billion in 2020, which includes brands like Knorr, Hellmann's, and also Ben & Jerry's. Last but certainly not least is the Homecare Division, which had a turnover of around 10 billion in 2020. And brands in that category include Omo and Domestos and Cif. We make many of our of the world's favorite brands. You can see on screen some of the samples, varying from Axe to Magnum and Lux. So it's really huge in terms of brands. If we move to the business environment and the challenges that we face on a day-to-day basis in Treasury, this shows some details on how we set up from a Treasury perspective. Global Treasury, as mentioned before, based in Switzerland. We have a team looking at operations, which includes corporate finance, and a small team that looks after banking relations and external funding. Back in middle office, we have since 2017 in Bangalore in India, when they were moved out of Rotterdam. 600 entities, which are around 2,500 bank accounts globally, and we operate around 30 global cash pools and numerous local and country cash pools. From a system perspective, it's SAP that we use on the business side, and since late or early 90s, we use a separate treasury management system from ION Wall Street Suite, which only contains for treasury relevant payments and collections. All commercial payments are done by out of SAP. Same goes for collections. With little visibility from a treasury perspective on those flows. Also because they're partially managed by third-party outsourcing providers. In order to set up a decent forecast process, we had to liaise with different stakeholders, country teams, third-party service providers, payroll, tax teams, etc. This, I guess, is nothing new for those that are looking at a cash forecasting process in your companies. To come to a structured forecast, given the different teams involved, was not so straightforward. Also because there's, at least in our case, no incentive for the local teams to come to a proper forecast, as we centrally manage their interest P&L. There are one or two exceptions to that, and those are especially those countries where there are penalties on having overdrafts, etc. Brazil being a typical example of that. What we have seen over the years is that systems have improved. The likes like Cashforce, and especially the last year around COVID and Corona, we saw quite a rise in vendors coming out with cash forecasting tools. Tools that only look at cash positioning, cash forecasting, but also some at working capital. What also turns out is that integration between systems has become much easier. So implementation has become easier to integrate, let's say, SAP with tools like Cashforce or any other. Also, the fact that systems run in the cloud, are SaaS-based, makes it easier to install and implement something. So what we did in 2019 was look at our forecasting. We noticed that we were not doing great. We didn't have a well-established process, and we were feeling that we lost opportunities there on the interest P&L. Decision at the time was also driven by the fact that systems improved and that it's easier to put something in place than it was years before. So what we were looking into is the selection process that we did at the time was, I think if you do a project, you look at the usual things. You look at various providers. And the names that you see on the slides, you will probably recognize. They're all good companies with good solutions. Some relatively new in the market in this space, others being around for longer. Main requirements that we were looking into were obviously cash positioning, cash visibility, and forecasting, but also ease of integration with other systems, scalable solution, and functionality in the area of working capital were things that we were looking into. At the time, we were running a large transformation project on the SAP side. We were looking at S4HANA, also S4 Treasury, and we were sort of forced to look into Cash and Liquidity Manager at the time as well. Once we started looking more in detail at this Cash and Liquidity Manager and the central finance box that we had running, it turned out that the box that we had running couldn't handle the Cash and Liquidity Manager. We had to install a different central finance box in order to make that work. But next to that, the overall S4HANA transformation project was sort of pushed out in the future. So that make us rethink on what solution to look at. So taking all the factors into account, the costs involved in doing something around SAP, the somewhat superior product functionality and the ease of installation of Cashforce, plus the relatively short payback periods around Cashforce, for Cashforce, made us decide to go with Cashforce. What was also important for us is that Cashforce was interested together with us to develop the tool. We had an interest at the time, which we expressed as well, is to start looking into APIs. And together with Cashforce and also with some of our banks, we started looking how to set up, enable API integration into the tool. We also realized that we were taking some risks as Cashforce was a relatively small company, but we still believe that we have made the right decision. The project is on track within the budget that we set ourselves. Great support from the Cashforce team, and also we find it equally important that the banks that have invested in Cashforce do not see this pure as an investment opportunity, but also as an opportunity to integrate it from an operational perspective. So they also see this as a way to promote the tool towards their clients to make it work for them. So it's not pure an investment from their side, but also trying to make it work for their clients and building it in their overall solution offering.
Yeah, Gerard, a question. You talked about that working capital functional part. Maybe if you can talk a little bit to that, what you meant with that, or what was sort of that importance in your sort of requirements?
Well, let me. I think what's important for us there is that we have the opportunity now more than we had in the past to understand what's happening on the purchase to pay or to cash side. By linking Cashforce with SAP, we have the opportunity to drill down to single vendors in SAP to understand what's happening there. That wasn't doable before we installed and started using Cashforce. Basically, we didn't pay any attention to that setup. So the fact that we can drill down now and have that opportunity will give us the opportunity to start looking into working capital forecasting as well.
Yeah.
So if you look at the vendors that are out there are many vendors out there, like I said, all good companies. There's no one that fits all the requirements, but for us, Cashforce came out as best solution, simply because of the ease of integration, the working capital functionality, but also the fact that they are very open for collaboration with us and other companies. If we start looking into the solution that we have put in place, it's where we are right now is that we have integrated with Finastra for the bank statements. Finastra is our Swift service bureau. We have for many of our accounts, we have bank statements not for all, but that's work in progress. We have integrated with our TMS, Wall Street Suite, which was relatively straightforward to do, and we have integrated with SAP. We have 4 SAP instances globally, but we had the luxury that for other processes, a data lake, a so-called data lake or data repository was set up, meaning that all the relevant tables were already available in the data lake. and there were only 1 or 2 tables missing, and those were easily integrated, which meant for the project that we only needed to interface with this data lake and not with each single ECC, sub ECC, which made us, which was a quick win for us. And also going forward, it's much easier to maintain if more entities that are not an SAP right now will be moved into the data lake. Not all entities within Unilever are using SAP. Some recent acquisitions are using their own systems, but there is a plan to move those to the data lake as well, which makes it easier for us to get that data as well. If needed, we upload manually information, or we will input information via spreadsheet uploads, depending on the requirement we choose for either manual or spreadsheet. As mentioned before, the working capital part is important for us. So having that visibility makes it really easy for us to start looking into working capital forecasting. The system itself gives great opportunities for workflow management, with approvals, with a good audit trail, which makes it easier for us to track who has done what. It's possible to enter comments to certain cash flows, which does really help to understand who enters which cash flow and for what purpose. Next to that, there are capabilities to do scenario analysis, but also to do comparison between actuals and forecasts, and even forecast with forecast, which is something that we don't have right now and don't do now. And lastly, but not unimportant, is the API enablement that will be there. We're actually doing a proof of concept as we speak, together with one of our banks and Cashforce, and hopefully by the end of the week we have an understanding if we have visibility about real-time balances in the tool itself, which will hopefully help short-term forecasting considerably.
Great.
Yeah.
That's a great overview, Gerard, of let's say the tool, but I guess put in practice with the different connectivities in place. I'm going to speak, a very quick word perhaps on that API enablement. That's quite a key element. And I think one of the elements which wasn't on the previous slide indeed, but worth mentioning, of course, is that potential overlap with a TMS system like a Wall Street Suite. I think in this case that we basically, where the Wall Street Suite system is very capable of providing the treasury functionality, we extend from there in terms of the cash forecasting and working capital bit, and we go really into the granular level detail of those ERP systems, and assisted through the workflow that you described. And I think the logic and machine learning that then can be adapted on top of or adopted on top of the bulk of the data, I think it will hold a lot of more secrets, or a lot of more, let's say, benefits later on in the trajectory. On that API part, maybe for some of you that will like that, let's take a look perhaps in the kitchen itself. Cashforce itself is based on a microservices architecture, and just as for some of you that are less technical, if you look to the left-hand side, you have the typical sort of monolithic architecture where UI, business logic, and the data access layer is actually combined into one shell, one house, where in sort of the more modern and microservices-based architectures, there is really call it a UI that talks with different APIs. So through APIs, talks with different microservices. And what that means is that there is a service to calculate balance, a service to let's say, initiate payments, a service that could receive information from a certain source. So, and all of them basically talk to the form of APIs. Now, these APIs are internal, but could also be, as you see on the right-hand side, could be targeted towards external systems. And I think this call it full API enablement Typically, it's not really shown in a lot of presentations, but we wanted to put it on a slide to give it a bit of a feel to everyone. If we talk about APIs, if we talk about microservices, what are we actually talking about? And I think this slide does a great job at telling that story. Now, if we think of the broader treasury ecosystem, there's lots of different use cases, as you can see here, from account transaction management all the way to budgeting and business planning, where that, let's say, API enablement can really benefit. If you look to the middle, where cash positioning and cash forecasting and working capital are depicted, you can see that there are different elements that can actually then be integrated from different outside sources. So think about banks, for example, where elements like account information can flow through all the way into the system. But of course, on the outside, on the other side, you have ERP systems which hold information, receivables, payables, orders, GL. And if you go and move next, you'll see other interactions with payments, for example, payment approvals. There are interactions that happen with systems like systems from the credit insurer in terms of getting ratings. There are interactions with your working capital data on the promise to pay information. If the credit collector hears when a certain invoice will be settled, there's P&L information that can be used for forecasting purposes. There's information that comes from the treasury system, like maturities that will need to come in. And on the other side, we also integrate to other BI systems or treasury reporting systems, so sending information outside of our perimeter. And the same, of course, happens between treasury systems and the bank. So this is just a little intermezzo to show, let's say, that APIs are already in use across the board, but of course are just a means to have a quick interaction with an outside system, and it will be, I think, more to come in the treasury ecosystem in the years in front of us. So what does that bring in terms of value and benefits, for you, Gerard?
Thanks, Nicola. First of all, starting using the tool gives better visibility of where the case is and where it will sit, hopefully in future. Not unimportant is that the business case also has been built around some savings, making better use of idle cash or making sure that you don't run into overdraft on certain accounts. But it's also the automation and the faster data gathering, which is crucial for us. Gives us better insight on the working capital, as we discussed before. And as you explained with the APIs, it's giving options to do more with the tool than we are able to do now. And that's also for us important. We are having plans, or are thinking of integrating this with other vendors for bank account management or for payments, as you mentioned. We're not there yet and haven't finalized conclusions on that yet, but it's definitely on the agenda. So yeah, plenty of opportunities still to come with the tool, based on the new ways of communicating via APIs. If you start looking at lessons learned, also this is not new, I guess, in a project. You need to understand your processes. What are your data drivers? What are your data sources? What we found out during the project is that we should have been closer connected to order to cash, purchase to pay than we ever were, and that was an important learning. Also, make sure that your data is up to date. Not only your master data, your bank accounts and the banks that you're using, but also the data availability coming out of SAP. In our case, the data lake, the data repository was great. So having a clear data strategy is also important. And next to that, of course, having the right people in the teams from all angles, and having the right support from senior management is important. In terms of what's next, is obviously finish the project. We wouldn't say we're halfway. We're doing this proof of concept with the APIs, and we're live with a number of countries and cash pools. Idea is to migrate to the next gen release in July, and thereafter we want to integrate the rest of the countries and the cash pools. That's planned to be finished in Q4 sometime. Start looking into working capital forecasting and integration with other vendors and tools is also on the list for Q4 or next year. Yeah, I think that was it, Nicola. So any questions if there's still time? Let's
I think, yeah, I would say right within the time. I think we have here 30 seconds on the clock. First things first is that, thank you very much, Gerard, and thank you very much to the audience as well for attending. I know there will be a on-demand way of viewing this session as well as recordings that can be looked at later. I think many questions will, I see some questions actually that popped up here. We'll try to actually get to them, I think, in private later as our time is up. I see the clock counting down. Thanks a lot.